Tonight on First Tuesday.
I just can't think of a single aspect of our community that's integrated.
I strongly believe in equal but separate. The Lord had wanted to make us all the same color. He made us that way to start with.
We take the long road south to Camden, Alabama, to a town divided. And after 20 years at the heart of the Troubles, it's goodbye Divis.
Absolutely nothing whatsoever will satisfy the people of Divis Flats except the complete demolition, the razing to the ground of this stinking, damp, rat-infested prison.
Good evening and welcome to First Tuesday. Our films tonight are both about divided communities, one in Belfast, where some of the worst housing in Europe provides textbook terrain for urban guerrillas. But first to the southern states of America, to towns that'll have a special place in United States history and in the folk songs of this century, towns like Montgomery, Selma and Birmingham, Alabama. In the name of civil rights for blacks, people protested, marched and even died there. And indeed, laws were passed in the 50s and 60s ending statutory segregation and official inequality. But did it change anything in Alabama? We went back to the small town of Camden, Alabama, to see what life is really like now in our film Black Belt.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
A quarter of a century ago, Dr. Martin Luther King led a social revolution in America that rocked people's lives. It was known as the Civil Rights Movement. They marched for equality and freedom from racial intolerance and bigotry. They were beaten, bruised, battered, and arrested for their pains. They armed themselves with dignity to break loose from the shackles of prejudice. They were gassed and hosed when protesting, abused, accused, and vilified, until equality was gained and voting rights were enshrined.
Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Freedom has always been an issue in the Black Belt of Alabama, named after the dark, rich soil that enriched some, enslaved others, and made cotton king. In Wilcox County lies Camden, off the beaten track, a sleepy backwater. The county has a population of 15,000, 70% of which are black. White comfort exists alongside black poverty, as it always has. Today, 25 years on, how much nearer is Dr. King's dream?
Now, on the charge of sale of untaxed alcoholic beverages, we're going to impose a fine of $50 plus cost. 6 months.
In the Camden courthouse, Judge Petway presides.
Just imposed on you.
You can't see me sitting here and say things have not changed. That would be ludicrous. Things have changed to a certain degree, but they have not changed. People are, I think, a bit more deceiving to a certain degree. You smile when you don't want to smile, but you do it because these are the things that we expect people to do. But deep down, people probably haven't changed that much.
With 70% of Wilcox County black, Judge Petway is not alone. Blacks occupy many of the senior elected positions in county government. Camden's Presbyterian minister and black leader once marched with Dr. King, Reverend Thomas Threadgill.
I take the position, and the best way I know to say it is, that we are on a battlefield, and our enemies are out there. Sometimes we can identify our enemies, and sometimes we cannot. We have been able to win a few isolated battles, but we're losing the war. And that's we're losing the war.
Depression extends beyond the civil rights issue. The economy is all but bankrupt. The Black Belt, once famed for its cotton, now has but a handful of farmers. Last summer, even the freight trains left town for good. Crumbling mansions dot the landscape, while the countryside has become a pine tree plantation, feeding a huge pulp mill. But timber hasn't been enough to stop the decline. Wilcox is now second poorest of the 67 counties in Alabama, itself one of the poorest states in the nation. Income levels are half the US average. In a county where unemployment is between 20 and 40%, what jobs there are thankfully to be had here. A barbecue at Big Daddy's bait shop. Country people have always shown a reluctance to change, no more so than the white burghers of Camden.
I strongly believe in equal but separate. The Lord had wanted to make us all the same color. He made us that way to start with. That's my feeling. I don't know. It's a bond that just had never been made and met. I'm not saying if you intermingle that you're going to bring all the white race down, but they need upgrading, just like the whites are continuing to try to upgrade themselves here.
Intermingling was, it seems, not part of the scheme of things. When the integration laws of the mid-60s were passed, whites reacted in kind. Rather than share their pleasures with their black fellow citizens, they simply closed their cinemas and their favorite meeting places. To this day, the white-owned town center has no bar, cafe, or restaurant.
We got a lot of jobs around here, but, you know, the blacks don't get them, you know. And we got companies that got only blacks doing the dirty work, you know. Truck driving jobs and, you know, office jobs or whatever, but our blacks can't get them, so I don't think that's integrated, you know. I mean, if it's integrated, I ought to be able to go up to the Lane Butane and get me a job too, driving truck, off on weekends, paid vacations, you know, but it's not like that. So to me, it's not integrated. I mean, a lot of people say we have come a long ways, but I don't think so. Don't you feel that way, Red?
Your picture's a little brighter than mine. You begin by saying that our society is not, our community is not totally integrated. I just don't think that we are integrated at all. I can't think of a single area in our county, not the first area in our county where we are integrated. Barbershops, swimming pools, churches, schools, employment, you name it. I just can't think of a single aspect of our community that's integrated.
Schooling was at the heart of the matter. In 1970, after years of white intransigence and despite numerous court orders, a judge ordered all public schools in Wilcox County to integrate. White response was to leave en masse and form their own private all-white academy. A daily pledge to one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Americans had this basic feeling that they were British subjects, and there was...
They learn how they became a nation, not in their case one, as they pledge daily, but two. No blacks here, despite many applications.
They still had the same rights as British subjects, right?
How important does Ronnie Simpkins, father of three, feel the academy is?
oh gosh, it's everything. It's educational. I mean, we would have to send our kids off to a boarding school without this white academy, strictly because of the qualified teachers. Lynn and I personally don't have anything against a few coming in or a few blacks being in the school or whatnot if they are qualified to be there. But I don't know, we were just raised different. It was just, they were raised different. I really believe deeply they should have their own churches, their own schools, and have own doctors just as good. But I just strong belief that you shouldn't intermingle. I say we don't have, I really wouldn't mind, you know, I don't mind them eating with them, but I don't know. This gets back to my basic belief about I just don't think we should intermarry. And if you go to school and you mix it up, eventually this is going to happen. And then you're going to have, like we do cattle, half-breed or whatever.
Ronnie Simpkins is an insurance salesman with a small farm on the outskirts of Camden.
You learn a love of nature. You learn what God put creatures here for. And that's the reason Lynn and I moved in the country, and that's where we're raising our children here. And I don't know, that's what it's all about. And you also learn love of each other and respect for nature and respect for each other. It just goes back and boils all back to education, 1,000%. That's the whole key to all of it. You just can't come up and mix, bam, and solve the problem. Yes, you can integrate, but when you integrate, have you bettered things? No. That didn't better this community. It tore this community to pieces. It tore it down. If this could have been eased in, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, Martin Luther King had some good ideas, but the bam, bam, bam I didn't agree with, and I still don't.
At Camden's public high school, opportunity rather than integration is of more concern.
What is your simple subject?
Class 11C, age between 17 and 19.
Next.
Neither of the dogs has a collar.
Very good. Next.
O-R-D, tooth, R-N-D, garrote. Two, R-N-D, garrote.
Okay, read it again for us.
O-R-D.
Reading levels are 5 years below national averages. Many can't read well enough to pass their driving test. With spending per pupil amongst the lowest in the nation, it's hardly surprising that educational standards are equally rated in the bottom 5%.
And it is plural because it refers to what?
Until 18 months ago, the supervision of education was exclusively in white hands.
Okay, very good.
To operate in a system as small as this, a dual education process, is really harming both races. Several ways. Number one, the student in the private school who feels that because he or she is in the private school, their educational opportunity is superior, or that they are superior to a black child. That is a myth. The black person who feels that there's no way out, we are locked in a tunnel and there's no light at the end of it. So I will just accept whatever is handed out to me, and I will not challenge the system, and I will never attempt to make waves. I will just rock on with the fourth and fifth generation of dependency on the welfare rolls. That too is a very, very harmful, that's really human abuse. So the only hope that Wilcox has is through its youth. And the youth belong to me in education. And once I can let them know, hey, it doesn't matter how poor you are economically, if you have self-esteem and if you have pride, you can become what you wish to be.
The Negro Mother by Langston Hughes. Children, I come back to you today to tell you the story of a long, dark way that I...
Across the nation, February was designated Black History Month to instill pride in black children. At the high school, over 300 children, 4 white, whose parents can't afford the private school fees.
until no white brother dares deny the children of the Negro mother.
I think when they use the word integrated, it's just a front, because I believe that Wilcox County, as far as what I see and what I'm living in every day, is still segregated. That's the way I see it.
Okay, well, like when I look at other white people, I don't think, well, why do they hate me? I just think, what reason made them think that they were so much better than we were? I don't think about whether they hate me or not. I just think, what made them think that they were so much better than we are?
They say Wilcox County have moved up or moved this way, but Wilcox County, to me, is still at a standstill because, hey, like, take employment. It's not even no jobs around here. Like, when we finished school, the question was asked, how many of us would like to come back to Wilcox County and work or establish something? There's nothing in Wilcox County for us to do. True. Nothing.
We're never going to be able to get any job worth anything if we don't educate our children.
A meeting of the county council who decide local affairs. 6 members, 4 black, 2 white, reflect the community's racial makeup. The debate concerns a minor matter of school board premises. Discussion, however, soon widens as old racial tensions surface.
The only people that have ever asked me to move them out are black people, and they have been numerous that want them to move out.
The kind that cater to you?
No.
No, you're not trying to work with anybody, sir. You're coming here with this, you might say, this Gestapo attitude that you might say Hitler used, trying to order people around.
No.
Are you coming here with this South African mentality, think this is apartheid? I don't know what you think, sir, but
Let me say this. You will never be able to get high-tech jobs in this county if you don't give the Board of Education and the superintendent a chance to spend their time educating our children instead of wondering where they're going to be tomorrow. Now, it's getting to be a problem. Some of us don't care. Some of us don't care because we don't have anybody down there. But some of us do. And I wish those of you who don't have anybody down there stop fighting us. Stop fighting us, because all of us are in this ship together. All of us. And believe it, white folks, you too. All of us is going down the drain together. Wilcox County is just going to die. It's just going to die.
Some would say Wilcox is already dying. The welfare office. Almost half the population is below the poverty level, and numbers are rising. There's been a huge decline in federal funding for housing, jobs, and development loans, slashed by 90% in the last 7 years. 2 out of every 3 black families now receive food stamps and welfare checks.
65, 130, 195, 260, 270.
£160, and that's your lot for another month, for a family of 4.
John Wright.
Cheryl Williams is a social worker. She's seen black unemployment top 50%, 5 times that of whites.
I feel that most of the people here would work if there were jobs, but they've been turned away so long, and it's discouraging. They aren't going to keep going and asking for jobs when there's nothing available. And I really feel that a lot of them have lost their dignity, have lost respect for themselves. Most people have lost pride in their surroundings and their dwellings, and it's just a pitiful situation. Great number of housing right here in the city limits of Camden, without cooking facilities and without refrigeration and that type of, some without electricity even. America being the richest country that it is, and seeing people living without the necessities that they need to care for their families. The house that we're going to visit now is not the worst housing condition in this area, but there are a lot of houses here in Camden and Wilcox County that are a lot worse than this one. Is it a boy or a girl?
A boy.
Okay. When was he born?
He was born February 12th.
Okay. Now,
Linda Dukes has just had her 3rd child. She's 23, and like most other black mothers here, she's single.
Did I see him? Did I look at him?
2/3 of all black children in Wilcox are born illegitimate, half to teenage mothers.
This little thing is wet, Linda. This little outfit is wet. You don't have any running water here?
No.
No means of getting any? You would have to pay?
She's supposed to have put a bathroom in it, but she hadn't put it in yet.
Okay.
And I doubt if she is.
Now, how much rent are you paying?
Linda, like so many others in the Black Belt, is caught in a spiral of substandard housing, pernicious poverty, and low educational levels, from which there appears to be no escape.
The key to our part of the country turning around is education. Because once our children are educated, they're able to go and get good jobs and make money and see the world and become the epitome of the accomplished American dream. Once people realize that we want the same things, we want our children to get a good education, we want to live in nice homes, we want to drive nice cars, we want a mortgage just like everybody else, and wait until the first of the month to pay all these bills. That's all we're asking for. Let's all get in debt together. And once they realize that that's all we want, it's not like we're asking for the moon. It's just a comfortable life, and we're willing to work for it. We've always worked for it. Anybody who knows the history of this part of the country in particular knows that the region was built off labor, free labor. And if we were paid for that labor, we probably would not be in the position we're in now. If we were paid at the end of slavery, each former slave had been given 40 acres of land and a mule, just that, things would have been totally different. But they say, okay, y'all are free. You don't have any land, no money, but you're free. Good, whoopee-doo. Anyone with a true sense of what's going on in this country knows that everything is not hunky-dory. I know people who are afraid to drive through certain parts of the state of Alabama in literal fear of their life. So if you know what's going on, you know everything's not fine, and there's a lot left to be done.
Bo and Wyland Philippi come from a prominent and old-established plantation family.
Bo and I are both professionals who are relatively young and are going to be working for a long time. And, of course, I don't want the county to kill itself off by repelling industry or newcomers to the county, because our business depends on the people here being able to make a living. So, and then hopefully they'll need some dentistry work done or need some legal advice and come to us, and we, in essence, we live off of them while they're working. But with the situation as it is now, I do believe if it doesn't change more, that the county will eventually die. And in the last year...
Well, don't you think it's gotten better?
But in the last year, but it's not just a situation where the blacks are having to step forth and
more responsible leadership. I think also some of the old line whites are going to have to step down who've had this. You're black and therefore should not participate in governmental control or this, that, and the other. I think it's going to take moderates from both sides who are not going to, even if they are prejudiced as far as race is concerned, they'll put that behind them and say, now look, you know, you represent your section and I represent my section and we've got to work together and let's, you know, bring industry in and do this, that, and the other. But I don't think it's just the blacks having to step forth too. I think the whites are going to have to make some changes.
But are the whites ready to make that change? Do you really think that the whites
so.
are?
I don't think all of them are. But I think the ones
There's some are more.
that are, I think there's some that'll never change.
At the Philippi ancestral home, at the family graveyard, a great aunt has been laid to rest alongside the founder of the dynasty, Daniel Cook.
And we commit her body to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in the sure and certain hope of the resurrection.
The plantations are no more, but have the attitudes that went with them changed? Frank and Virginia Philippi.
I don't think there's any such thing as white supremacy. But I think that each race has characteristics. Intellectually, as a whole, I feel sure the Caucasian race is above the Negro race. I don't think black government has shown that they can establish an effective government anywhere in the world.
They don't really work that hard at it. They demand to be given these powers or these privileges, but once they get them, they don't do anything they don't even do anything for their own race. Whether it's me, but you've got to give it to me. You've got to give it to my race.
Yeah.
But they don't want to work for it. They just want to demand it, and they don't want to improve anything once they get it. They improve nothing.
For the Threadgill family, their personal history has left an indelible imprint. 96-year-old Obadiah Threadgill remembers his grandmother, who was enslaved.
Well, I understand that it was a twin. She was named Mary and her sister named Martha. And I don't know exactly how old they were, but they were real young when they were sold. I understand they put them up on a block. You know, that people bid on horses or cows now, and the man that go the highest bidder, that would win. And so that man that bought them, he took them off in a hack, a buggy or something like that. And their mother hung over to the buggy or hack, whatever it was, long as she could until the man whipped to the horse and made him run out among them. And she ain't seen her children since, and they ain't seen their mother since.
He's more forgiving in things like that than I am. It makes my blood boil. And while I know that there are things that we need to forget, there are things that I hope that you never ask me to forget. And this is one of them. Don't ever ask me to forget how they sold my great-grandmother and her sister, separated them from their mother, and then separated the two of them. Don't you ever ask me to forget that.
Well, let me ask, are you holding it against them? Huh?
I said, don't ask me to forget that now.
Well, I know, but...
Because there is no justification anywhere to treat a human being that way. There's no justification anywhere.
But God is forgiving God.
I understand that, and I hope He forgives them.
Because you got to forgive. He says, if your brother treats you wrong, love him anyhow.
He didn't treat me wrong as my brother. He treated me wrong as a slave master to my grandparents. Yeah. That's who he was. There is nothing in the New Testament anywhere that suggests that a Christian is called upon to lie down and let other people trample over him. It was done, but there's nowhere in the New Testament does it recommend that. And I just can't subscribe to it. And I can't forget incidents like that.
It's basically just tradition that there's no interaction between the blacks and whites dating back to the Civil War. The blacks were the slave to the whites, and ever since then the whites viewed them as inferior, not worthy of, attending the same places and riding the same buses, and it's just not really accepted here. It is in other places, I'm sure, but in just the Deep South, it's just, I guess it's dating back from previous times.
It's like an inborn fear that they're going to rob you blind and stab you and kill you, rape your children or something.
Well, there's not much of an opportunity to meet them. You really don't see them that much. You see them going down the road and everything, but they're usually in big groups and everything, so you don't ever talk to them.
I know a few, but they're all older that helped raise me when I was younger, so I have no contact with any below the age of 50. So I don't really know them that well at all, really.
Blacks dating whites in Camden, it doesn't happen. They're just so separate. There's just no social interaction at all in them. So, if you meet a black person, it's almost like on an employee basis. He's working for you or he's working with you or something like that. You never just meet him out in town or anything, or hardly ever.
I think it would make sense for there to be one school that has the most qualified teachers and that will offer the best general education for the students. But in Camden, I don't think it will happen because it's just so inbred that the whites go to the white school and the blacks go to the black school. It would make perfect sense, but I don't think it'll happen.
I have a dream that one day down in Alabama with its vicious races, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
Today, a quarter of a century later, in segregated Camden, Martin Luther King's words have a sad and ironic ring to them.
I'm just trying to tell it like it is. And because I really believe that when Judgment Day comes, the Lord's not going to know what color you are. I really believe that. But to keep our community and our standards up like we are, I just basically believe now that we should continue to keep it equal but separate. But let them have as good as we do, the blacks.
Well, it's not just the human race, it's animals. The Lord didn't mean for elephants and cats to mix. And so if that's the case, then, he gave us here with a brain, and we're supposed to use what he gave us to the best of our ability most of the time.
It's difficult to share power, and that's in any civilization. In South Africa, in America, wherever, it's difficult to give what you've had for such a long time. And when you have this innate sense that I was born to lead and you were born to follow. I was born to live in the big house and you were born to live in the shack. It's difficult to get that out of your system. It's probably impossible to get it out of your system. But the thing is, we have to start teaching our children, and our children have to start believing that they were born to live in the White House also, and put it in their minds. And when they start believing that, then they can achieve it. It's a mental game. It's all mental. We know that. We've been limited because we thought we couldn't do. And we've been limited because of other legal restrictions on us. But the mind has a lot to do with it. So there's that sense of superiority that we were put here to govern. And I think all y'all probably suffer from that. You English, South Africans, whatever, you all taught that, we're superior just because we're males, for one. And we're white males for the other. So we're definitely 2 steps above all the rest of the people. But y'all are going to have to learn to share. Y'all will eventually learn to share power. If not, we will have to help you learn.
Determined still to overcome, Judge Joe Celeste Petway in an Alabama still segregated in spirit. In a moment, demolishing part of Belfast, the part they shouldn't ever have built. That's after the break. Welcome back. In Belfast, where Protestants and Catholics divide into their separate ghettos, the housing estates in the centre of the city read like a list of urban guerrilla battlegrounds. One such is the notorious Divis Estate in mainly Catholic West Belfast. Divis is a tower block linked with lower five-storey blocks. Its life has mirrored all the Northern Ireland troubles. Its first tenants moved in the late 60s, many of them burned out of their homes in sectarian attacks. Since then, the name Divis has been linked with rioting, with being an IRA recruiting ground, with attacks on and raids by soldiers and policemen. It can also be quoted as one of the worst examples of housing conditions in Europe. Now at last, it's to be demolished. But before it finally comes down, we've been to talk to the people who live there and who can now say a thankful goodbye, Divis.
This is the 1980s. We're no better off than we were in the 1930s, to be quite honest with you, in the housing conditions.
The Divis Flats in West Belfast, Northern Ireland, opened in May 1968, by 1972 called the youngest slum in Europe.
Well, it's just disgrace, like, flats were built in the first place, like, because I had really no childhood.
Hardly anyone on the estate has a job. 9 out of 10 adults are on the dole. One in 3 families are single parent. All are Catholic. But Divis is not just another decrepit housing estate in a declining industrial landscape. It's a Republican stronghold in the divided city of Belfast. If something has happened in the last 18 years of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, it will have happened here. Divis has become a byword for violence and for republicanism.
There's not a home that hasn't been hit by the Troubles. Fathers, brothers, you name it.
To outsiders, especially to Protestants, to Unionists, Divis symbolises bandit country. It's a place you'd never go near. It's a place you'd be terrified of finding yourself stranded near. It's a nightmare world, which they know of as a backdrop to violence, which they think of as a reservoir of terrorism.
There's been a lot of deaths in the estate, violent deaths. There's been people shot dead. There's been bombs in the area. There's been young children killed. The estate is under 24-hour surveillance by the British Army from the top of the Divis Tower. They can see into every flat in the complex.
The soldiers are as much a part of life in Divis as the families themselves.
I was afraid nearly every day. You can never turn around and say you're not afraid out there. If you turn around and say you're not afraid, that's when you start making mistakes.
At last, after a 15-year campaign by the tenants, the dreadful enclosure is being pulled down. Divis has stood both as a symbol of the Troubles and as a symbol of the mistakes of 60s housing. Demolition will mean the end of an era.
I don't know what it's like to live in a house with a garden. You know, to me, that's, you know, it's like living in Beverly Hills, you know, living in a house with a garden.
"20 years ago, the housing conditions in Catholic West Belfast were appalling. It was estimated that 1/3 of the homes were unfit for human habitation. In the hope for something better, few argued against wholesale slum clearance. What seemed to be the solution in 1968 was the low-rise, high-density concrete construction of the Divis Flats. Christine Irvin was one of the first tenants.
When I moved into Divis first, I thought it was brilliant. The children were all young then, boys were young. We only lived in a two-bedroom house. And so when I moved to Divis, I had 4 nice big bedrooms, bathroom. You know, we only had outside toilets and no bath facilities, and it was just great.
But the delight was short-lived. Fundamental design faults and poor maintenance created new slum conditions. Now the families just want to get out. The saying on the estate is, out of hell there is no redemption, and out of Divis there is no transfer. This turns out to be true for the Walls family.
Hello, Miss Walls. Hello, Daniel. How are you? Now we're going to see how this little girl is. How are you keeping? You've had a bit of jaundice, I believe. Let me have a wee look at your eyes, love. Uh-huh. Yes. Have you any pain here, love? Danielle is suffering from asthma. She's had it now for a few years. She's been attending hospital and living here, as they do in Divis flats. She gets the exacerbations, the chest colds, all of which, of course, are detrimental to her asthmatic condition.
Have you had any word from the housing executive? Like, I'm on this transfer list 4.5 years.
That's right.
And I don't seem to be getting anywhere at all with them.
She's had the asthma for years. The jaundice, of course, is a new thing here. Well, all I can say is it's an absolute disgrace. I mean, well, as you know, we've written many letters to them and I've phoned them. And we just have to keep the pressure up because it is a disgrace that you have not been rehoused. And I totally would accept that. I would say, if I was asked what is the main sort of reason why people would come to me as a doctor with Divis flats, I would say it would be depression and chronic anxiety. I'm thinking of the mother trying to rear children in a sort of concrete jungle like Divis, a jungle that, you know, is more fit for animals than for human beings.
An army of insects, cockroaches and rats take advantage of these conditions to spread disease. The strain of coping with life in Divis shows in the number of adults on tranquilizers, 68%. The constant presence of police and soldiers creates less of a home, more of a battleground. Injury and death are commonplace for all who enter.
Over the years, soldiers have been killed in Divis in various ways. They've been bombed, they've been shot, they've been killed on the walkways, they've been killed at the lifts, they've been ambushed from a distance, they've been shot close up. The fact that the place is almost a textbook example of a design for urban guerrilla warfare didn't help.
As you're walking along, everything around you is a death trap. There's corners, which can be hidden booby traps, bombs. Every window looks onto you, which could have a gunman there, which you wouldn't see unless the shot rung out. I mean, the whole thing is dangerous. It's a death trap. The kids won't hit you or nothing. They'll spit on you. But the teenagers will lash out on you, and they will chuck bricks at you. And they're the ones you've got to watch out for. They're the ones who'll chuck little bottle bombs they used to throw at you, and you couldn't lay a finger on them for it. Many times I wanted to grab hold of one and take my frustration out of him, but you just couldn't do nothing. You had to turn a blind eye, couldn't say nothing. You just had to carry on patrolling and ignore it, which is very hard.
August 1969, at the beginning of the present Troubles. In Belfast, Protestant gangs went on the rampage, burning down Catholic homes. Hard on their heels came the RUC and B Specials, spraying indiscriminate machine gun fire from their armoured trucks. Sheltering from the bullets in their flat in Divis was the Rooney family. 9-year-old Patrick was to be the first victim of the Troubles.
When the shooting started to get heavy, I ran upstairs to get the kids all into one room. I panicked more or less to get the kids into one room.
And the bullets come down through here and right into the cloakroom and right out, straight out the back to the working kitchen. And Patrick was standing at the wall and he just slid down it, and I thought he had fainted, and I lifted him up. And the blood was all gushing from the back of his head.
As far as I'm concerned, I didn't care who the men who killed. They meant to kill somebody that day, as far as I'm concerned.
If he had been out throwing petrol bombs, rioting, or anything like that, but getting shot in his own house, I did feel better. And he was my first son, like. I moved away to try and forget it. You still don't forget, like. After so long, yet you try to live with it, but you never forget it. And to see that they got off with it, it makes you more better, like. He was just a child, but he was my child. He was my child, and I don't forget.
A 9-year-old boy shot dead by the police in his own home. the reputation of Divis was being cast. The newly formed Provisional IRA was to find the estate a fertile recruiting ground for sympathisers and volunteers.
The reaction generally to Divis, I suppose, dates from about then too, that people outside Divis and outside Catholic areas began to see it as another word for an IRA stronghold, and who then projected their own fear and hate of the IRA onto Divis in particular.
In August 1971, a dawn raid on Catholic areas heralded the start of internment without trial. Divis tenants were among the first to be arrested. Christine Irvin remembers how that morning affected the families left behind.
On the 9th of August, they were all taken away, took down to an old disused yard in Albert Street, in their underwear, taken out of their beds at small hours of the morning in their underwear, and taken away, and that was the last, taken away and put on cash.
Once the army moved in, repression, as ever, bred more activity, and the army's presence here at all was seen as an affront, as provocation.
People felt very, very bitter at the time. Naturally, they would, like. Husbands and brothers and way, and, you know, their wives left with wee small children, and fathers taken away.
You know, everybody was so boiled up with anger. You had to do something. You had to go out and defend the area, because the British troops in the IUC were coming in, and they were just harassing the people, and you had to do something about it, you know. Every young fella I know was out doing something, you know.
In July 1975, the inevitable. Christine's third son became a victim of the Troubles. 16-year-old Charles Irvin went out in an old car he'd saved up to buy.
Well, I never seen Charles alive again when he left the house. That was the end of Charles. Apparently, he was driving about and his car was backfiring, and a foot patrol seen the car and heard the backfiring and had him followed, and he went through a checkpoint and never stopped. It wasn't a checkpoint, it was just a random checkpoint. And they said he had been shooting at them, and he was shot dead. It was hard to cope with. I still haven't coped with it. I still haven't come to terms with it, really. Like, it's something you don't come to terms with. Just one of those things, like I'm not the only mother in Belfast that has had heartaches like this.
I'm angry and bitter. You know, I wasn't brought up to be angry and bitter. You know, my mother brought me up to, you know, to live a normal life as best we could, like, but if anybody's made me angry and bitter, it's the British Army and the IUC.
That's their country, and we're out there invading their country, and they don't like that. They're fighting for something they believe in. I respect them for that. But also, I'm doing a job which I don't choose to do myself. It's something I've got to do. I've been told to do it. And I'll get angry when they react to us the way they do. And small kids, the way they react to us, it makes me very angry. And it still does to this day.
It's not their fight. They're young. They come from unemployment black spots in England, Wales and Scotland. Everybody here knows that. And especially here, I think when you watch anyone coming in here, the backdrop is depressing and unnerving. It must be appalling for them. But they do come in carrying heavy guns, and they are seen as intruders and treated accordingly.
Divis is at the bottom of the Falls Road, just yards from the 12-foot-high wall that separates it from the Protestant Shankill Road. In 1975, religious assassinations were at their height. By the autumn, there had been 200 sectarian murders.
My husband used to come home from work, but before he would have come in, he would have called into a bar. Well, I'm standing that Tuesday night making his tea, and a wee boy run in and says to me, "Your husband's shot, but he's not dead." Now, that's how I got word about him. It was the Loyalists, for they got somebody for it about 10 years after it. They got someone for it. No, they didn't go to shoot him, you know, just him. It was for anybody that was in the road, for they just kept shooting all around the bar. It was on the 4th of March, 75 he was shot, and he died on the 27th of May, 75. Well, he lived 11 weeks, and if he did live 11 weeks, he was like a skeleton when he died.
In these flats, death has become a way of life. No family is untouched by the violence of the Troubles or the brutality of the surroundings. 33 tenants and 5 soldiers have been killed here. 1980, and the conditions in the flats had got so bad that the Tenants Association put demolition firmly on the agenda.
Absolutely nothing whatsoever will satisfy the people of Divis Flats except the complete demolition, the razing to the ground of this stinking, damp, rat-infested prison. That's the only thing that will satisfy the people of Divis Flats.
But the authorities would not deliver.
If the flats were demolished today, there would be nearly 1,000 families needing homes in the morning. Where on earth are they to go? There are already over 2,000 families on the waiting lists for West Belfast.
Well, there were years when the Housing Executive and the Department of the Environment stalled and said they couldn't do anything, and that they shouldn't do anything, and that the faults weren't irremediable, and that they weren't unlivable with, and that if people took greater care of the environment, etc., the place ought to be basically all right. And for that, I think they must be culpable.
So the tenants took the law into their own hands and formed the Divis Demolition Committee. When a tenant moved out of a flat, the Demolition Committee moved in, disconnected all the services, and made the flat uninhabitable. 2 committee members ended up in court, charged with criminal damage. They pleaded guilty, but the judge's summing up shocked Belfast. It is terrible that I have to sit in a court in Northern Ireland and hear about houses which are overcrowded, damp, and rat-infested. It is time something was done about Divis Flats, and soon. He let them off with a warning. (1981) and the height of the hunger strike riots in Catholic Belfast. In this atmosphere, a newly formed Republican army, the INLA, flourished in the Divis. A few months later, in an attack on an army patrol, the INLA planted a bomb on a balcony. But 3 boys were there too. Only one survived. Felix, brother of Patrick Rooney, the first victim of the Troubles.
As we got onto the balcony, there was a foot patrol standing on the balcony of the army. And Camden, they just came behind us, and then that's when the explosion went off. And I was blowing up the balcony. I was dazed and shocked. I was asked to identify Stephen Bennett to see if it was him or not. I couldn't believe it was him because he was so close to me, you know. I couldn't believe he was dead. And Cam Valde, he was just laying down, but he didn't die right away. He died a few days later, I think, in hospital. It was pointless, so it was. Really frightened me, like. That's what, because you never think anything, you know there's troubles, like, but you never think you're going to get hurt or anything like that.
For the mothers of Divis, this bomb was a turning point. They didn't want their homes used as a battleground anymore. In a spontaneous demonstration, they called for all the gunmen to be driven from the estate. The mothers had endured 13 years of violence and had brought up a whole generation of children who did not know peace. Today, the Troubles are simply part of the children's everyday school lessons. They write about their lives as other children do, but their message is unique.
The miracle in Divis Flats. One day, the people of Divis Flats had a meeting. They were all sick of living in a place where there was no peace. They decided to obey the 10 Commandments.
They were all talking about keeping Divis like heaven. There would be no stolen cars or joyriders, There will be also no fighting and no army in the Divis flats.
We are not going to say any more bad words ever again, and there might not be any more bad people who go around and kill other people. There were no more bad words, no drinking, and also no riots. People would not jump off the Divis Tower and all the other flats in Divis.
We will all start living new lives, and so they did. One day, a reporter came into the Divis flats and found out that in the Divis flats there was peace and quiet. Soon in every newspaper in the world, it was written on the very first page.
Right, we've listened to the story of the miracle in Divis. What other changes would come about if everyone decided to take the commandments as they were and to live by them? Maureen, Holland. It really is, I suppose, in a way, a haven for the children and an oasis for them. They come in here, they've the regular teachers, the regular timetable, and it's been the nearest to normality, I suppose, that they have experienced. Well, what you probably think that the situation we're living in is abnormal, but we've become so used to it, you know. We don't really know any other form of life. And I think we are normal. I think life is normal here.
People have always talked about this place as though it's a prison. Unconsciously, I remember a man saying to me once, "I've done 11 years here now. I must be due to get somewhere else by now."
Well, it's been called that it's the worst housing estate in Western Europe. I don't know if that's true or not. I think it must be one of the worst. It's just, I mean, you only have to look at it to know what it's like. When you come in and look round the place, the staircases are all broken, dampness, there's no street, no lighting on the balconies. It's a haven for joyriders and glue sniffers. There's absolutely no facilities for children here. Then you've young mothers living on balconies trying to negotiate stairs with maybe a toddler, a baby in a pram and 2 or 3 bags of shopping. And there's absolutely nowhere for kids here. So it resulted in kids sort of playing anywhere they basically could in and around the area.
In 1983, the lack of anywhere safe to play resulted in tragedy. Betty McClenaghan rushed to this spot one February afternoon when she heard that her 4-year-old grandson was missing while out playing. She met her daughter Christine there.
She says, "My wee boy's in that hole, he's under the water." And the next thing was she passed out. But they went and they got the frogmen and everything, and they must have worked for hours, you know, trying to get him, but they couldn't get him. There was no sign of him. I think it must have been about 12 o'clock when they got his body. My daughter never got over it. She had a miscarriage after that, and then she took a massive brain hemorrhage. And she's really never been the same girl, you know, from it happened. She don't think she'll ever be the same again, like, to be quite honest. I don't think really any of us got over it, you know, for it was an awful tragedy. And he was such a dear wee thing.
March 1987, and the Dines family are the last tenants to leave the latest block to be demolished. They have lived here the full 19 years.
It's the worst place for anybody. They say that everywhere's as bad, but I couldn't see any place as bad as this. I wouldn't put a dog in here.
Well, I'm really delighted I'm moving there, because this place has just got me down completely. And we're delighted that we are moving tomorrow. I suppose we'll not realise how happy we'll be to be moved, to get out of here.
The 60s experiment with system-built flats is over for the Dines family, but not the remaining tenants who must wait for new homes to be built. When accused of causing their own surroundings, the tenants turn the blame back on the housing authorities.
They're the people that's responsible for building this complex. They put the people in here, living on top of one another, no privacy whatsoever. As you can see by the estates that's been going up around this area, if you give someone somewhere to live that they can take pride in, they will do it. Everybody that live in those estates all lived in Divis flats, but they've got a home now that they can take pride in.
It was almost too late to feel relief. It had gone on for so long. You couldn't feel pleasure, really, because at the thought of how many people had been forced to put up with these conditions for that length of time.
In a way, the Residents Association's fight is only beginning now, because we want a say in our future. We want to say in what is to replace Divis flats.
It should never have happened in the first place. If there ever was a good reason for this idea, this wasn't the time and this wasn't the place. Here, it couldn't have been anything but the disaster it was.
That's the best thing they've done in Northern Ireland, is to pull them Divis flats down.
It shouldn't be long now till we're out.
5 of the 12 Divis blocks are now gone, and demolition is to start soon on one more. It'll be at least 10 years before the building of a traditional housing complex is complete. Eventually, there'll be no trace of what was once Divis, and for the people who have to live there, that can't happen fast enough. That's all from us for this month. We'll be back on the first Tuesday in the new year. Until then, good night.